Hey guys, so the video I'm responding to today comes from a YouTuber who goes by Schrodinger's cat. In case you're not familiar with who that is, he's a YouTuber who mostly makes videos about sovereign citizens and First Amendment auditors, and while he's not a political channel per se, he does generally seem sympathetic with things like law enforcement, government authority, victimless crimes. So there is a political element to his content even though he's not a political channel per se. And this is a video where the political side of his content sort of becomes more apparent. In this video, he's going to be shaming people who don't want to wear masks, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, has become a very common thing during this pandemic. You know, not wanting to suck air through a face diaper for hours at a time apparently makes you a horrible, selfish person who doesn't care about other people. So anyways, let's take a look.
Everyone who is not a conspiracy idiot knows that we are in the midst of a global pandemic and it is getting worse.
So right off the bat, I'm not particularly a fan of how he's choosing to frame the issue. By saying that everyone who's not a conspiracy idiot believes this, he's essentially trying to blanket paint anyone who holds an opposing viewpoint as a conspiracy idiot. So if you disagree with the whole COVID narrative, you're automatically a conspiracy idiot, regardless of whatever data or facts you have to back up your position. This is an example of poisoning the well. You know, planting a bias against the opposition in your audience's mind.
The vast majority of healthcare professionals are telling us that social distancing and wearing prophylactic masks is a major way to mitigate the spread.
It's not quite that simple. When he says the vast majority of healthcare professionals, what he's mostly referring to is that small segment of the healthcare profession which is getting coverage by the mainstream media. So, you know, like Dr. Fauci and his whole cabal. When you look at the scientific and healthcare community as a whole, you'll see that opinions on things like masks and social distancing is a bit more mixed. Not only is there widespread disagreements on how helpful things like masks and social distancing really are, but there's even disagreement on the particulars, such as what type of mask is most effective, what's the ideal distance people should keep between themselves to maintain social distance. In the description, I'll link to a WordPress article that actually links to a variety of different sources regarding the effectiveness of things like masks and lockdowns. I suggest taking the time to look at it, since it'll give you a bit more of a holistic impression of what the opinions of healthcare professionals are regarding the pandemic.
Right. So why are there so many Karens running around out there throwing temper tantrums about having put a piece of cloth over their face?
In case you're not familiar with what a Karen is, it's basically a person who causes a scene in public every time they don't get their way. And while they've always kind of been a thing, they've noticeably been on the rise during the pandemic. And one of the things that Schrodinger's cat doesn't mention in this video is that there are Karens on both sides of the mask aisle. Yes, there are Karens who throw tantrums over having to wear a mask, but at the same time there are also Karens who throw tantrums because other people aren't wearing masks.
Let's take a look at a Karen in the wild.
So notice how Schrodinger's cat is choosing to only focus on the people who are crazy and throw tantrums, as opposed to looking at more legitimate examples of mask criticism. Now, in the case of Schrodinger's cat, his channel is sort of more geared toward making fun of people who do stupid shit, so in his case it kind of makes sense, but this is a common strategy employed by people who support mask mandates. They'll sort of filter out all the low-hanging fruit, you know, the crazy people who throw temper tantrums, and try and portray them as the entirety of the criticism.
Say cheese, you're in Costco not wearing your mask, refusing to wear your mask.
Yes, call the police.
And here's her mother.
Yes, there's my mother. Shame me like an ass. Get out of here.
Look how proud she is that she may very well be killing her mother and several other people right now.
But what if her mother and those other people consented to the risk? I mean, everyone who's in the store at the time this video was recorded all consciously made the decision to go there. Nobody, to my knowledge at least, was compelled to go there against their will. I mean, everyone knows that when you go to a public venue like a store, there's a chance you could come within proximity of other people, and therefore have a high risk of exposure to the virus. Since these people made the conscious decision to go to that store, as opposed to stay at home and use Instacart or DoorDash, there's a strong argument to be made that these people voluntarily accepted the risk that she's posing to them. Another thing to notice here is that her mother isn't wearing a mask either, which adds credulence to the idea that she voluntarily decided to accept the risk.
He's taking pictures of me because I haven't had a moment to put my mask on.
You can put it on right now, ma'am.
He's shaming me. I'm not going to do that for you.
You should be ashamed.
Ashamed for what? I mean, she was just in the store shopping around minding her own business, and you have to go and harass her.
I'll do that when I'm ready to do it.
That's not how that works, Karen. You're supposed to put the mask on before you enter the store. The virus doesn't have a grace period.
Should be ashamed.
It's ridiculous to shame people. Don't you have anything better to do?
No, not right now, I don't.
Like, seriously, dude? You really don't have anything better to do with your time than to go around harassing people in a store.
Do you understand science?
Science? Maybe better than you do.
Maybe.
Apparently.
You see, the pro-mask crowd makes a big deal about how they're all about science. Like, you don't agree with the narrative I'm pushing? You won't just blindly accept talking points from CNN and MSNBC without looking for additional data to back them up? Well, gee, you must hate science then. Because to these people, science is less of an objective search for the truth about reality, and more a religious doctrine which is completely beyond any sort of criticism or critical evaluation whatsoever. Like, these left-wing bozos are some of the least scientific people there is.
I'm the one protecting other people by wearing a mask.
You know, I don't care if someone wants to be pro-mask. If someone wants to wear a mask, support wearing masks, encourage others to wear masks, that's completely fine. They're within their right to do that. What I simply cannot fucking stand is when people need to go being obnoxious pricks about it. Like, people who just want to wear a mask or support wearing masks, I don't have a problem with. It's when people decide to jam their thumb up their ass and suddenly think they're better than everyone else because they're wearing a mask.
Are you? Well, great.
There is absolutely no way that this lady is a doctor, and the fact that she's lying about it makes her an even more pathetic Karen.
How do you know she's not a doctor? Have you done additional research regarding the situation to verify that? Or are you just assuming that she must not be a doctor because she disagrees with you? 'Cause I got news for you, buddy. Plenty of doctors and scientists have also been criticizing masks. Even the CDC itself isn't 100% sold on their effectiveness. No, I'm not certain whether or not this woman is a doctor. She could very well be lying about that. But I will point out that it is a bit intellectually disingenuous to just automatically assume that she must not be a doctor because she disagrees with you on something.
Pull out your ID. I want to see.
We know what to do.
I want to see your credentials. Pull them out. If you're a doctor, let's see them.
Yeah, because everyone's supposed to just carry around their professional credentials everywhere they go. Assuming that she's not lying about being a doctor, I'd understand wanting to see her credentials if she was on duty in a hospital, but she's on her personal time in a grocery store somewhere. Like what, am I just supposed to keep a copy of my college degree on me at all times? In case I need to prove my professional knowledge to some random dipshit in the grocery store?
So you can go away with your phone and you can figure out what you need to do with your life, and I'll figure out what I need to do with mine.
Actually, what she just brought up there was a pretty good point. We seem to live in this society where people have the impression that we're all too stupid to figure out how to live our own lives. So we need government to basically babysit all of us like we're a bunch of children and have government pass down these mandates of how everyone is supposed to behave. The way I see it, most of us are adults. I'm sure there are some exceptions out there, but on the whole, I think most grown adults are able to think critically and reason and figure out ways around life's challenges for themselves. Like, why shouldn't people just be free to figure out whether or not they want to wear a mask? I mean, if mask wearing is just such this obviously brilliant idea, I'd imagine then that most sane, rational people would be able to get on board with it without needing to be forced to.
You're protected right now.
Actually, that's another good point. Isn't this guy wearing a mask? I mean, we never see his face on camera, but given his whole white horse, holier-than-thou attitude toward masks, we can probably assume that he's wearing one. Well, if this guy's wearing a mask, isn't he protected? I mean, if these masks are so wonderfully effective at protecting people from COVID, then it shouldn't matter if other people aren't wearing one. You're wearing one, so you're protected.
You're about to be escorted out of the store if you don't put in your mask.
I'll wait till he tells me to, okay?
Let's see. You've already been told multiple times to put on your mask by me and employees.
Notice how he says by me and employees. So yeah, this guy doesn't even work there. He's not an employee trying to enforce the company's rules. He's just some random jackass who has nothing better to do with his time but to harass people in a grocery store. It's kind of sad, really.
You're such a good boy with your mask.
Thank you very much. I try. I take my health and the health of others very seriously.
I highly doubt that since you seem to be getting all up close and personal with these people not wearing masks. You know what I don't understand about these mask shamers? On the one hand, they're concerned that people are putting their health at risk by not wearing a mask, but on the other hand, they seem all too eager to go up to these people not wearing masks and harass them. I don't know about you, but if I was concerned that someone was spreading around a deadly contagion and potentially compromising my health, I'd be doing the exact opposite. I'd be trying to keep my distance from these people. Like the fact that these mask mask shamers are chomping at the bit to get up close and personal with these people who are supposedly compromising their health. That's kind of a signal to me that all this mask shaming is less about health and more about ego.
That's why you all have masks on. We're good. I take mine very seriously.
Yeah.
And you know nothing about it.
Actually, that's true. This guy doesn't know anything about this woman's personal life, or if she has any sort of respiratory condition that would make it difficult for her to wear a mask, and yet he's just going up to her and harassing her anyways. I wonder how many of these superiority complex dipshits are out there just harassing innocent people with respiratory conditions. I mean, it's already hard enough that they have whatever condition they have. Now they can't go to the grocery store without some arrogant fucktard yelling at them.
Okay.
And you know nothing about
Well,
it.
you-
So you can have fun with it.
What you know about me, ma'am, is that I'm wearing my mask.
Once again, congratulations.
Well, congratulations, buddy. You want a medal or some shit? God, all these pro-mask people are so obnoxious. They think they're so much better than everyone else just because they put a piece of cloth over their face. Like, I don't care if someone wants to wear a mask, but for fuck's sake, don't be obnoxious about it.
It's Costco company policy that everyone wear a mask in the store.
You know, if this dude is so concerned about her not wearing a mask, why doesn't he just go up to the store manager and report her? I mean, even that would at least be more productive than just standing around and harassing her.
Now let's see the toll that has been taken on a Karen who has been forced to wear a mask.
45 minutes of having it on. It's the first time I've worn one. I am disoriented. I'm a little mad, if you can't tell that already. Like, I'm frustrated, but I don't feel good physically. Like, I can tell you right now, I wasn't getting enough oxygen, and I just had on one of these little stupid things.
I work on submarines for a living, and the Department of Defense has mandated that we wear masks whenever we are on board. I wear a mask for 8+ hours a day, so I can tell you firsthand that any symptoms she is having are psychosomatic.
So this is a common argument you'll hear from people who advocate for mask mandates. Oh, I wear a mask for X number of hours a day and I'm perfectly fine. The problem with this argument is that it takes anecdotal evidence from personal experience and basically tries to extrapolate it across the board to everybody. That's not really an accurate strategy of argumentation, especially with something regarding health. People's bodies are all different. Sure, you yourself may be able to handle wearing a mask for long periods of time, no problem, and that's fantastic, but that's you. Problem is, it's not good enough for you people just to piss off and wear your own mask, you have to force one on to everyone else. And as I've mentioned previously, people might have certain respiratory conditions that makes it difficult for them to wear masks for long periods of time. If you can wear a mask for a long period of time without any problems, great, good for you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's applicable to everyone else.
I feel dizzy. My hands are kind of tingly. My heart is beating fast. So some of it's an emotional reaction, but some of it's a physical reaction. I understand the virus is real. Okay, I understand the virus is real.
You know, I'm glad she points this out because a very common straw man of people who criticize the COVID hysteria is that we must think the virus isn't real. And while I'm sure there's plenty of people who actually don't believe that COVID-19 is real, like 90% of the people who criticize the COVID hysteria do full well acknowledge that COVID-19 is real. Just because we don't think that COVID-19 is worth shutting down society and ruining lives over doesn't mean we don't think it's real. Like, arguing that there are more reasonable ways to deal with the risks that come with the virus isn't quite the same thing as denying that the virus exists.
Friends, look at the numbers and tell me why everybody's living in fear.
This is just cases and deaths in the U.S. Pay particular attention to the new cases at the bottom.
So a very common strategy used to spread fear and anxiety is to throw around big, scary-sounding numbers. Like, oh no, there's over 1 million bajillion cases, so we should all be scared.
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
One of the reasons that using statistics in an argument can be a bit deceptive is that you can very easily make things seem more significant than they really are by just throwing off numbers without going into any sort of details that might be relevant. Here's what I mean by that. I've explained in previous videos why it is that using case and fatality numbers in order to determine how deadly COVID-19 is entirely accurate. There are some problems with these numbers. Starting with cases. I've explained this in previous videos, but a case simply indicates a positive COVID-19 COVID-19 test. Now, assuming that these tests are 100% accurate and never return false positives. Now, of course, anyone who actually knows anything about these COVID-19 tests will know that's a pretty damn generous assumption, but for the time being, we'll just make this assumption for the sake of getting a point across. As we've already established, a case simply indicates a positive COVID-19 test. Bearing this in mind, it may very well be the case that an increase in cases might not be caused by or even correlated with an increase in infections. The actual infection rate could be steady or even on a decline, but if more people are getting tested, you're going to end up with more COVID-19 cases on the record. The case numbers also don't tell us anything about what symptoms each person experienced. For all we know, an overwhelming majority of those cases might be people who've experienced either mild or no symptoms at all. As for death numbers, well, not only are these notoriously inflated, there have been instances of hospitals recording things like motorcycle accidents as a COVID death, but also just looking at death numbers in and of themselves doesn't give us an accurate way to determine how deadly COVID-19 is. There are two primary reasons for this. The first reason is that a lot of the people who died from COVID-19 had pre-existing conditions at the time of their death. So it's not exactly clear whether or not and to what extent COVID-19 contributed to that person's death. The other reason is that just looking at the death count doesn't give us the mortality rate. In order to properly assess how deadly COVID-19 is, we need to know not only the number of people who've caught COVID and died, but also the number of people who've caught COVID and haven't died. Because you can probably make any disease look deadly by just looking at the number of people it's killed, but if that number is incredibly small in comparison to the number of people who've caught it and haven't died, that's likely an indication that this disease really isn't all that deadly. And that's just the kicker. We don't know, and most likely will never know, the total number of people who've caught COVID. This is because one of the key characteristics of COVID is that it's able to infect people without inflicting symptoms upon them. Because of this, there's a lot of people out there who may have caught COVID but never even realized it. So does this mean that the data is wrong or inaccurate? Not necessarily. But it does mean that there's definitely more to the story than can be gleaned by simply looking at the numbers.
Tell me why we're putting these things on and not being able to breathe. I just want to cry. Like, that's all I want to do is cry.
Oh, what, you gonna cry?
No.
No, go ahead, cry. Let me see you. Let me see you cry.
Because you can't see people's faces. You can't make human connection. We can't hug people. We can't hold their babies. I'm at the end of it. I'm just simply at the end of it. It doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And I'm not okay with it. Nothing about what we're doing is supported by the numbers that are out there.
This is actually true. Tom Woods actually mentions this in several episodes of his podcast, but when you look at charts for COVID-19 numbers in places where mask mandates were introduced, there's pretty much no correlation between when a mask mandate was introduced and a change in COVID-19 cases. As a matter of fact, some places actually experienced an increase in COVID-19 cases once a mask mandate was introduced, and other places experienced a decrease once their mask mandate was lifted. Now, does this prove definitively once and for all that masks don't do anything to help? Not necessarily, but at the very least it does call it into doubt.
Those of you that know me, like, I am one of the most compassionate, caring people you will ever meet. And I do care about you. But I also care about me and my children and my family. And I do care about my rights. And it's probably the last time I'm wearing this because I feel terrible. I feel emotionally terrible, but I feel physically like it affected me. So anyway, there you go.
So there you have it. To a Karen, wearing a surgical mask for 45 minutes a day is equivalent to a stay in a POW camp. She will likely be in therapy for years.
So I agree this woman's being a bit overly dramatic, but a lot of the points she made are still perfectly valid. In particular, her point regarding not seeing people's faces. And it sort of goes back to a central theme running along all these COVID-19 measures. A lot of the people who advocate for these measures aren't fully thinking through the implications or unintended consequences of these measures. You see, a very big element to the way that we humans communicate are nonverbal cues, things like facial expressions. And forcing people to wear masks all the time hinders, if not outright eliminates, this aspect of our communication. And a lot of these skills regarding communication and socialization are learned at a very young age. So the fact that we're forcing our children to grow up in this environment where it's considered bad to see each other's faces is a little bit fucked up, to say the least, in my opinion.
Our next Karen proves that you're never too old to act like a baby.
unless you have a medical reason to not wear it.
Of course, it's happening at a Costco. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this or if it's just me, but it seems as if of all the stores out there, Costco has been particularly anal about masks. Like, of all these videos out there of people getting into confrontations with store employees over masks, it seems like a good portion of them come from Costco. Just a bit of a casual observation.
There's a bit of background noise, but what is happening here is the lady in pink does not want to wear a mask, and the Costco employee is trying to reason with her.
I will say this. I do feel bad for all the retail employees out there who are kind of being forced to play mask police. You know, these people are just out trying to earn some money, and thanks to this fake liberal pandemic, they're suddenly just caught in this situation where they have this extra responsibility thrown onto them. Probably for no extra pay as well.
In case you don't know what Costco is, it's a member-only store, and you agree to abide by the store policy when you become a member. So in this case, she can't even argue that mask laws are unconstitutional, because that is irrelevant.
Just an interesting side note, a lot of these mask orders are in fact unconstitutional, because in a lot of places they're not going through the proper democratic legislative process. They're being unilaterally decreed by executive authority, usually under some sort of emergency power or something like that.
So you signed a contract with Costco. You signed a contract with Costco.
So I've never really shopped at a Costco before, I'm not entirely familiar with how it works, but just looking at this strictly from a non-aggression principle standpoint, if there's nothing in the contract that says masks are required as a condition of shopping there, or anything that says that masks may potentially become a condition of shopping there, if there's nothing in the contract that specifies anything of that sort of nature, then this woman in pink would be in the right. Again, I'm not entirely familiar with Costco or how it works, so for all I know, maybe there is something in the contract that's like that. I will say this, if it's this woman's intention to challenge the rules there, it may have been a smart move to bring a copy of that contract with her. At least that's what I would have done in that situation.
No, but I just need you to put that on for now, while you're in the building. That's all, just temporarily while you're in here, and then you can take it right back off.
I mentioned this earlier in the video, but if the other employees are wearing masks, aren't they protected?
So you need to have it on while you're doing your transaction. You have to put your mask on while you do your transaction. You can take it off. No, you have to put it across your face. Unless you have a medical reason. There's nothing reason you don't. I have a medical reason. You do? I'm 77 years old. I'm good. Okay, you just have to tell me if you have one. It doesn't have to have one. Well, then you have to wear it.
It's difficult to exactly parse together what's exactly being said in this conversation, given the high levels of background noise. It appears as if this woman's trying to claim a medical exemption, which makes sense. She does appear to be elderly, and people who are older typically have breathing conditions. You know, if I was in that employee's position, I'd probably respect the fact that she's a senior citizen and most likely has difficulty breathing, and I just leave her the fuck alone. That's just me. So yeah, I mean, it is true that Costco is a private business, it's private property, and they're allowed to implement whatever rules they want. Here's my stance on the whole mask thing, and this has more or less been my opinion since the beginning of the pandemic. It hasn't really changed. I'm against government mask mandates. I'm against the government just unilaterally saying everyone across this area has to wear a mask. Now, since businesses are private property, I do think the owners have a right to decide whether or not to require masks. And as dumb as I think it is, if a store wants to require wearing a mask as a condition of walking in there, that's their right.
That's something coming off your ear right now. Not that you have your mask on.
You know what? Know that I am not a member of Costco any longer.
Okay, you want me to get that taken care of?
Yes, please.
All right, you'll have to put your mask on for me to do that.
I will not.
Well, then come back in another time, okay?
Your property.
Okay. He's going to require the same. If you want to step outside here, I'll have him come meet you outside.
I'm staying right here.
Then you need to You didn't need to do that. That's our policy.
I'm sorry.
Can I help you guys? I'm with you. We're going to walk outside.
So I'm not necessarily going to say that this woman is in the right. She is very clearly breaking the store's rules. However, I will say this. If that employee would have decided to help her instead of stand there and argue with her, chances are she'd be out of the store by now. I mean, the whole intention of this mask rule is to keep people safe, to keep people from spreading the virus around. By standing there and arguing with her as opposed to just serving her, you're actually increasing the amount of time she's in the store, thus increasing any sort of risk of spreading COVID that she might have. If the intention really is to keep people safe, it may be best to just swallow the L and try and get her out of the store quicker. That's just my opinion.
No, I'm going to have him.
As Karens do, she asked to speak to a manager, and the employee asked her to step outside, and the manager will come out and speak with her. But this isn't just any Karen. This is a veteran Karen with years of Karening experience, and she's going to show all the amateur Karens how it's done.
So yeah, basically what happens next is this woman, for whatever reason, decides to sit on the floor. I'm not sure whether it's to pout over having to wear a mask, or if maybe she's elderly, she has a hard time standing up for long periods of time. I'm inclined to go with the former, quite honestly. But in all fairness, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say maybe it's the latter.
Come out and come out and see you.
Nothing wrong with it. We have 3 of them yesterday. I don't have the receipt, but you got cards.
Can I get you a chair out front? There's a place to sit.
I don't know if you're able to receipt, but we picked up 3 yesterday. And 2 got discounted prices for $30 off, but the 3rd one.
Let me know if you agree with me in the description box that it's hilarious that she would rather sit on a filthy floor than put a clean mask on her face.
How do you know the mask is clean though? Because sure, maybe the mask might be clean initially. The problem is that masks kind of lose their effectiveness over time if they're not either replaced or washed. You know those blue fold-out surgical masks that people are wearing? Those aren't really designed to be worn repeatedly for long periods of time. They're designed to be worn for a couple hours then replaced. I mean, there's reasons they're sold in containers of 50 or 100. See, when you're wearing a mask 24/7 constantly, as people seem to think you should be doing, those masks aren't going to be clean for very long. They're going to pick up pathogens pretty quickly. And once those masks become saturated with those pathogens, you're no longer actually keeping things sanitary by wearing the mask. You're now actually spreading the virus around. A lot of other types of PPE, such as gloves, need to be replaced regularly for the same reason.
Yeah, no problem.
You sure? Okay. We just get off to the side somewhere, yeah.
What happened? She just Here, keep recording.
I just want to state for the record that even though I'm not necessarily a fan of masks or requiring masks, I still don't approve of what this woman is doing right now. She's basically throwing a childlike tantrum because she doesn't agree with the store's rules. Which I don't really agree with them either. I think it's stupid for them to require masks, but it's their store and they get to make the rules. You may have seen all these videos circulating on the internet of people getting into fights with store employees over not wearing a mask. And as much as I'm not a fan of wearing a mask, I don't condone that type of behavior at all. Because, you know, a lot of these retail employees, they're just high school or college kids looking to earn some extra money. They're not looking to start fights or cause trouble. Chances are they hate these rules too, but they're just stuck enforcing them because their boss wants them to, or the government wants them to, or whoever.
Hello. What can I do for you?
Yeah, take your time. It's entertainment.
Do you have to? Ma'am, do you have a minute to start? So I'm gonna ask you to do that. Gentleman, and then I'm gonna ask you. I'm the gentleman. We're not gonna do this.
Despite her best efforts, Karen failed and was denied access to the store.
So yeah, she was ultimately kicked out of the store, and rightfully so. She knew what the rules were at that store and she chose not to follow them. And as much as I'm not a fan of mask requirements, in order to be a consistent libertarian, I do have to recognize that store owners do have property rights, and it's their prerogative to set the conditions of doing business. And you're not really accomplishing anything by throwing these tantrums. I mean, you're getting kicked out of the store, and the store is still having those rules in place. You're not changing the rules there. The only thing you're really doing is making, well, not just yourself look bad, but also the sort of the mass criticism look bad in general. Because what happens is people throw these tantrums and the videos circulate around the internet, and when people think of mass criticism, they're not going to think of, the actual arguments against forcing people to wear masks. They're going to think of these videos and think, well, all people who are against mask mandates must be lunatics. So these people are really hurting the cause by doing this. If I could maybe suggest a bit of a high road solution, what if instead of throwing tantrums because you have to wear a mask into a particular business, maybe you could write a letter to the owner of that business explaining to them why you disagree with their rules. Perhaps in your letter you could even mention some of the data that suggests masks aren't all that effective. And if a business owner gets enough of these letters, there's a good chance that you may end up getting a change that you want made. This is much more of a civilized, more of a high road sort of solution to the disagreement, in my opinion.
The virus is real, and it's killing real people.
You know what's also killing real people? The hysteria surrounding the virus. I predicted early on in this pandemic that the insane overreaction to COVID was going to have a higher death count than COVID itself. Well, a year and a half later, it appears as if I was right. Suicide, domestic abuse, drug overdoses, starvation. A lot of these deaths are a direct result of our overreaction to this little virus. The media will go on and on about the COVID deaths, but they'll never talk about these deaths.
And it's also killing real businesses and costing people jobs.
The virus isn't costing people jobs and businesses. The government's insane overreaction to the virus is. I'll link to some videos in the description which go into full detail explaining not only why lockdowns are completely pointless, but also why they cause more harm than benefit.
If you can't be bothered to do something as simple as wear a mask, then keep your dumb ass at home and let the rest of us get this thing under control.
Or how about this? I'm going to go out and be free, and if you want to cower in fear over a virus with a less than 2% mortality rate, you can keep your dumb ass at home. So yeah, that concludes my response to this video. I think the biggest problem here is the way you chose to frame the issue. Framing is key. Even good arguments can still fail if they're framed poorly. Maybe there are some perfectly valid arguments out there as to why people should wear masks. Problem is that in this video, he filtered out all the crazy people instead of looking at legitimate arguments. And we're like, here, see, the people who don't want to wear masks are all crazy. The thing is, you could really do this with any sort of idea. For any idea or belief out there, there's probably crazy people who hold it. So you could take a bunch of crazy people who hold a certain belief and only present them and say, look, see, everyone who holds this belief are all a bunch of crackpots. Now, in the case of Schrodinger's cat, this is at least somewhat understandable since his channel is sort of geared toward making fun of people who do stupid shit. And if it were simply that, I could maybe cut him a pass here. But by using terms like conspiracy idiot and dumbass, it seems like he is intentionally trying to frame the opposition this way, and I think that's the biggest problem I have with this video. Now here's the thing, this Schrodinger's cat guy does seem like a smart guy. I'm sure he could definitely take on the legitimate, well thought out criticisms against masks. So what I would love to see from Schrodinger's cat is maybe a video where he does look at some of these more legitimate mask arguments and try to debunk them. Until next time, this has been Philosophopossum making stupidity play dead. Take care.
Fuck the mask order and the new world order. Fuck the mask order and the new world order. Fuck the mask order and the new world order. Hang the pedal politicians and their Satan forces.